Hey guys, tonight, we're heading straight into the fog-choked, coal-smeared, urine-splashed underbelly of Victorian life. You're walking the streets of 1850s London damp wool, clinging to your arms, boots sinking into something that squelches. You can't tell if it's horse-dung rotting food or someone's chamber pot contents tossed out an upstairs window. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. The stench is indescribable. It's thick, like an invisible soup you have to wade through with your face. You pull your scarf tighter, but the smell of smoke, sewage, sweat, and something suspiciously like dead rat seeps right through. This is what hygiene smells like in the world's most advanced city. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to see how many brave souls are joining us from their beds. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off a rattling horse-drawn omnibus and straight into chaos. The pavement is slick with soot and spittle, and the fog isn't romantic. It's a grimy yellow, thick with coal smoke and chemical exhaust. They actually have a name for it, London Particular. Sounds like a biscuit. Smells like the devil's backside. You dodge past a costermonger's cart, stacked with bruised apples and cabbage, careful not to slip in something brown and definitely organic. Children dart past barefoot, their cheeks smeared with grime, and one of them, maybe 7 years old, carries a dead rat proudly by the tail. Welcome to the Victorian city, the place where hygiene goes to die. But this isn't just filth for the poor. Even in upper-crust neighborhoods, people live with daily filth that would give a modern health inspector a panic attack. Coal soot rains constantly. You wipe your windowsills and they blacken again in hours. Historians still argue whether the average working-class home was cleaner than the streets, or vice versa. Honestly, neither would pass a white glove test. You walk past rows of narrow brick houses, chimney smoke curling like toxic lace. Every building has a fireplace. Every fireplace belches soot. It clings to curtains, clothes, even eyelashes. Breathing this air is like snorting a charcoal briquette. And let's be real, you're doing it 24/7. A clatter nearby startles you. It's the dustman emptying a night soil cart. Translation, human waste. Into a big wooden barrel. Onto a cart. Rolling down your street. Smelling like fermented despair. If you're lucky, it won't spill again like it did last week. And then comes the water situation. You want to wash your face, go ahead. Draw some from the communal pump down the block. Maybe it's clean, maybe it's not. Cholera outbreaks kill tens of thousands, and people are only just starting to link that to water. Before then, the logic went bad. Smells cause disease, not germs, not feces in the drinking water, just bad vibes. To be fair, those vibes are truly terrible. And that river you're walking past, the Thames, don't let the scenic name fool you. In summer 1858, the Great Stink made the river so repulsive that Parliament shut down because MPs couldn't bear the smell inside Westminster. That's how bad it got. The literal lawmakers of the empire just gave up and left the room. Your nose twitches again. Somewhere nearby, someone's boiling bones for soup, someone else is tanning leather with urine, and someone definitely hasn't emptied their chamber pot for weeks, months. You breathe through your mouth. Big mistake. It's somehow worse, but you carry on. What choice do you have? Everyone else is surviving it or pretending to. Etiquette books warn you not to complain. Just dab some rose water on a Handkerchief, press it to your face and carry on with your day. Congratulations, you've just experienced the equivalent of an early gas mask. There's a certain strange pride here. People believe enduring the filth builds character. Bathing too often is seen as suspicious, even dangerous. Doctors warn that stripping away the body's natural oils might invite illness. It's a charming theory right up there with leeches cure everything. And speaking of charm, what's that glinting in the gutter? A lost hairpin, a tooth. You don't ask, you don't want to know. You reach your lodging house. Inside isn't much better. The floor is covered with straw to soak up spills. There's a distinct smell of damp socks, chimney ash, and boiled onions. Still, it's home for now. At least the wallpaper hasn't peeled completely off from the moisture. Yet. The landlady welcomes you with a damp rag and a weak smile. You'll get used to the smell, she promises. Everyone does. You nod, not quite believing her, but you stay. Because what else can you do? This is your life now. This is Victorian hygiene. Or rather, the complete glorious absence of it. You wake up feeling sticky. Not sweaty exactly, just coated in a thin layer of something that might be coal dust or damp or sleep itself. You stretch, then remember it's bath day. Once a week if you're lucky. You brace yourself. There's no indoor plumbing, of course. That's a luxury reserved for the wealthy, or more accurately, the filthy wealthy, who don't have to carry their own water. For you, a bath involves a tin basin, one kettle of heated water, and a bucket of cold. If you're in a family, you go in order. First person gets the cleanest soak. By the time it's your turn, you're basically sitting in a lukewarm human soup. You lift the edge of your petticoat toes hitting the cold stone floor as you shuffle toward the washroom. Don't let the name fool you. It's a corner with a curtain, a basin, and a bar of yellow soap that looks more like cheese. Soap was expensive. If your household uses it at all, it's likely homemade from rendered animal fat and lye. Smells faintly like bacon and firewood. Tastes well, you're not supposed to taste it, but accidents happen. You pour the water carefully. It sloshes over the rim, and instantly the floor puddles up like it's been waiting. The water's not hot anymore. It never is by the time it gets carried up the stairs. You lower yourself in anyway, knees to chest, arms wrapped tight. This is your moment of cleanliness for the week. You scrub as best you can. Underarms behind ears between toes. That's the polite minimum. Hair. You leave that alone for now. Washing it is a whole separate operation, and you'll get to that maybe next week. Maybe. Victorians were obsessed with respectability, but rarely with actual cleanliness. Smelling nice didn't mean being clean. It meant not smelling obviously bad. There's a difference. And since frequent bathing was considered risky, something about weakening your constitution, you get a pass for smelling human. Everyone does. If you cover it up with lavender water or vinegar, you're golden. Historians still argue whether most people even bothered bathing weekly. Some say once a month was more typical, especially in rural areas. Others believe the industrial cities forced a slightly more regular habit out of sheer survival. If you came home covered in soot and sweat from factory work, you had to do something. Even if that something was just scrubbing your hands and face with a rag and a prayer. Oh, and let's not forget the shared bathing arrangements. Boarding houses and tenements often had one basin per dozen tenants. You get to know your neighbors intimately. If you're modest, you might try to wash while still in your underthings. Not because it's more effective, but because privacy is harder to come by than soap. There are public bathhouses, but they cost money. You're working class. You count your coins. Is a bath worth more than a pint? A hot pie, new bootlaces, sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it's yes, especially if you're courting. Nothing says romance like being only mildly smelly. You scrub your legs with a flannel cloth, wincing as the rough texture bites into your skin. People don't exfoliate here. They abrade. Gently flaying the outer layer is the goal. It makes you look fresher. Or at least a little less like you just crawled out of a chimney. You think about the upper classes. They bathe in porcelain tubs brought hot water by servants. Some even believe in cold water therapy. Rich eccentrics will stand half naked in their gardens in January, pouring freezing water over themselves and insisting it's invigorating. You think they're nuts. They think you're barbaric. Everyone's judging someone. And then there are the medical opinions. Some doctors praise warm baths as a miracle for circulation. Others warn that excessive bathing could open the pores, and through those pores, illness will sneak in like a thief. One even claims water softens the moral fiber. That one probably hasn't bathed in weeks. You try not to judge. He's a man of science after all. You stand dripping and reach for the towel. It's stiff. It always is. Washed too rarely dried in cold air, it feels like drying yourself with cardboard. But it does the job. Mostly. You wrap it around your shoulders, shivering. The water in the basin is now cloudy with gray. Bits of lint float like tiny lost ships. You sigh. Someone else is coming in after you. You should drain it. You don't. That's their problem. And here's the kicker. Even people who could afford more frequent bathing didn't necessarily want it. Queen Victoria herself reportedly bathed only once a month. She believed in a certain kind of natural cleanliness that the body left alone would self-regulate. Kind of like sourdough or compost. You dress again. Under things first, still damp, still unwashed. Outerwear next. Everything smells faintly of smoke and starch. You smooth your hair, pin it back, and pretend you're pristine. Congratulations. You're clean now. Or at least cleaner than yesterday. That counts. And as you step outside, fresh-ish and dressed, you realize everyone else is doing the same. Everyone else is sweaty, sooty, and barely washed. No one notices your smell because it's their smell too. It's the smell of an empire darling. Oh, the industrial revolution. You scratch your scalp and feel it again, that little flutter. A twitch. Not quite a tickle, not quite a sting. Just enough to make your hand pause mid-motion, as though whatever just moved under your hair might move again. Spoiler alert, it will. Victorian hair hygiene is a battlefield. And your scalp, a hotly contested zone. Lice are more or less a given on children, adults, servants, even the upper crust. Entire families comb through each other's heads by firelight, popping nits, and pretending this is what intimacy looks like. You've learned to sit still during delousing sessions, even when vinegar trickles into your eyes. You haven't washed your hair in, well, you can't quite remember. Maybe 2 weeks. 3 doesn't matter. It's not expected. Shampoo isn't even a thing yet. Most people use plain water, or if they're feeling fancy, a soap made with herbs or egg yolk. You once heard of a girl who washed her hair with gin. You're not sure if she ended up drunk or bald. Probably both. Instead of washing, you brush. A lot. with stiff boar bristle brushes passed down from aunt to niece, often shared among siblings. The idea is that brushing distributes natural oils, which is technically true, though it also distributes any critters who've made a home on your scalp. And if you're particularly unlucky, you might also get ringworm from a brush. Delightful. You've tried the usual remedies. Lard mixed with mercury. Tea tree oil if you're lucky enough to live near an apothecary who believes in plants. Turpentine for the desperate. Historians still argue whether Victorians preferred to treat lice or simply outlast them. For many, it was the latter. The bugs came, the bugs went, and life just carried on. If you're wealthier, you might hide your lice under an elaborate hairpiece or extensions made from actual human hair. Imagine scraping together your servants' fallen locks, weaving them into braids and pinning them atop your head like a trophy. Now that's resourceful. You look in the mirror while a bit of polished metal that vaguely reflects your shape. Your hair is pinned tight, coiled, and lacquered into submission with bear grease or pomade. Yes, bear grease. It's prized for its sheen and hold. You tell yourself it smells earthy. Really, it just smells animal. Let's not forget dandruff. Flakes like snow drifting gently onto your collar. No one mentions it. Everyone has it. Just another sign that your scalp is alive. Too alive some days. You might attempt a dry shampoo, a mix of ground starch or powdered lavender, dabbed onto your scalp and brushed out. It helps a little. Mostly it just makes your hair look less wet, or at least less obviously greasy. Smelling like a Victorian spice rack is considered high praise. For those with curly or textured hair, the struggle is multiplied. Victorian Britain didn't exactly cater to variety. If your hair didn't lie flat under a bonnet, you were often encouraged, pressured to correct it. With hot irons, with chemical rinses, with judgmental stares in drawing rooms. Hygiene was never just about health. It was always tangled up with class, race, and control. And then there's headgear. Everyone wears hats. Big hats, small hats, absurd feathered hats. Hats for morning hats, for flirting hats, just for walking to the market. Your hair is rarely seen uncovered, and honestly, that helps. People assume the grease is intentional, fashionable, a little matronly glow. Still, you dream of a real wash. Not a cold rinse in a bowl, but a proper cleansing, a warm lather, a rinse that doesn't sting a towel, that doesn't smell like mildew, maybe even a comb without broken teeth. Luxury, thy name is hygiene. But tonight, like every night, you'll sleep with your hair braided tightly. Not for style, for defense. Against lice, against tangles, against the creeping suspicion that you're starting to smell like a candle dipped in bacon fat. Before you crawl into bed, you glance at your pillow. You've changed the pillowcase well, turned it inside out. Good enough. You brush your hair exactly 100 strokes. Not because it helps, but because someone once said it did, and tradition is stronger than evidence. You sigh, scratch again, and lie back, hoping that whatever's nesting on your scalp tonight at least has the decency to be quiet. You wake up with something gritty in your mouth. Not dirt, not dust, though those would be reasonable guesses in your current surroundings. No, it's your teeth. Or rather, the fuzzy film coating them, the telltale signal of a mouth that hasn't been properly cleaned in far too long. Welcome to Victorian dental hygiene. If you're lucky, you've still got most of your teeth. If you're average, you've already parted ways with a few molars, maybe courtesy of sugar-laden tea, maybe from sheer bad luck. Either way, your mouth is a battlefield, and your weapons are frankly medieval. You reach for your toothbrush. It's made of bone. The handle is smooth from wear, and the bristles pig hair. They're stiff, scratchy, and slowly falling out like your cousin William's mustache. You wet it, dip it into a tin of tooth powder, and brace yourself. The powder tastes like someone ground up sidewalk chalk and mixed it with salt. That's basically what it is. Recipes vary wildly. Some include charcoal, others baking soda, and a few even call for crushed oyster shells or burnt bread crusts. If you're wealthy or just plain reckless, you might have a recipe that uses brick dust. That'll really scrub the enamel off. Efficiency is pain. You brush in circles, sort of. There's no official technique. Just keep going until the taste gets unbearable or the foam turns a suspicious gray. You spit into the chamber pot or maybe into the fireplace if no one's looking. That's normal. Etiquette books don't mention where exactly to dispose of mouth debris. It's a use your judgment situation. Yours is questionable at best. You rinse with water if you trust the water. Some people swish with vinegar or even wine. You once heard of a woman who gargled with brandy and then drank it. You can't decide if that's unhygienic or genius. And then there's urine. Yes, human urine. Used not for shock value, but for its ammonia. Some ancient Roman recipes lingered into the early 19th century, and a few folks in rural areas swore by it. Historians still argue whether this was genuinely practiced in Victorian England or just one of those fringe tales that refuses to die. Either way, the smell is not something you forget. Floss ha. Not unless you count a frayed bit of thread or a sharpened toothpick. You try to pry out the bits of bread and mutton wedged between your teeth with your fingernail, hoping nobody notices. They do. And dentists. Oh, sweet summer child. Dentists in the 1800s were often also barbers, blacksmiths, or general tooth pullers. No anesthesia, no sterile tools, just a chair, a pair of iron pliers, and a prayer. They say if the pain doesn't kill you, the infection might. You've seen people with abscessed teeth that swelled their faces like spoiled fruit. You pretend you didn't hear their groans through the boarding house wall. One local doctor insists brushing is unnecessary, that vigorous chewing is enough to clean the mouth. He recommends stale bread crusts and raw carrots. You try that for a day. You nearly choke on a splinter of sourdough. He's wrong. Very wrong. Your breath, don't even ask. Everyone's breath smells bad. You might chew mint leaves if you can get them. More likely, you'll suck on a clove or a piece of licorice root. If you're feeling daring, a lump of chalk. Perfumed pastilles are all the rage among society ladies. They don't work, but they look pretty in tins. And then there are dentures. Oh, the dentures. Some are made of porcelain. Others, more disturbingly, are made from the teeth of the dead, sold after battles, looted from graves, or scavenged by enterprising surgeons. Waterloo teeth were once considered premium. Imagine smiling with a stranger's molars from a Napoleonic battlefield. Charming. Still, you do your best. You finish brushing spit again and dab your lips dry with the corner of your sleeve. They're cracked. Everyone's lips are cracked. It's the climate, the coal smoke, the endless wind. You look in the mirror and give yourself a quick smile. Not perfect, not white, but intact. For now. You make a mental note, no sweets tonight. Then you remember what's for dinner. Treacle pudding. You sigh. The Victorians talked a good game about morality and purity, but their mouths told a different story. Letters from the era described fetid breath and blackened stumps without blinking. Personal hygiene was important, sure, but only so long as it didn't cost too much, or feel too new, or interfere with social modesty. Which is why you'll keep brushing with powdered chalk and pig bristles and hope you never need to see a man with pliers and a grim expression. You give your brush a final rinse and tuck it away. Then, as always, you check your breath by cupping your hand and exhaling into it. It smells like old bread and regret. You shrug. That's practically minty by 1850s standards. You're walking briskly down a cobbled alley when you hear a splash from above. You stop just in time to avoid getting baptized by something unspeakable. You glance up. A woman leans out of a second-story window, empty chamber pot in hand, and shouts the mandatory warning, "Gardez l'eau," which if your French is rusty means "watch out for the water," which is ironic because it's not water, not even close. Victorian toileting is an experience you won't soon forget, mostly because you can't. Not with your nose. Not with your shoes. Not with your dignity. If you're middle or lower class, your toilet is likely a wooden seat over a pit in the backyard, a privy. It's cold, especially at night, and you bring a candle unless you want to misjudge your aim. Spiders always. Rats sometimes. Ghosts of meals past, definitely. The smell never really leaves your clothes, no matter how tightly you bundle up. At home, you rely on a chamber pot. It's under the bed, nestled discreetly behind the leg of the washstand. You use it at night with a blanket over your knees and a prayer that your siblings are asleep. And in the morning, you, or someone unlucky, gets to carry it down the stairs to empty it. Into what? Into the gutter. Into a cesspool. Into the Thames. Pick your poison, literally. Some houses have cesspits, brick-lined holes where waste accumulates. These are emptied by night soil men who arrive under cover of darkness with buckets, shovels, and nerves of steel. They shovel human waste into carts and take it to the outskirts of the city. Sometimes. Other times, it just leaks into the soil, into the cellar, into your dreams. In the city, open sewers are common. The waste flows slowly, thickly along the curbside in narrow gutters. It mixes with horse manure blood from butchers and runoff from factories. Children splash in it. Dogs drink from it. You do your best not to think about it, but you can't avoid the smell. In summer, it's unbearable. Thick, ripe, tangy with decay. During the 1858 heatwave, London experienced the infamous Great Stink. The Thames became so toxic that Parliament soaked its curtains in chloride of lime just to keep working. Historians still argue whether this olfactory assault did more to spur sanitation reform than any public health study. Spoiler, it probably did. And toilets. Real flushing toilets are still rare. The first designs date back decades, but they're expensive, unreliable, and often installed incorrectly. When you do find one, the water pressure is terrible. If the pipe gets blocked, the contents return with vengeance. Public facilities, There are few, and they're for men. Women have to improvise. Many resort to discreetly ducking behind carriages or stairwells. It's not unladylike if there are no options. In fact, that's the origin of the phrase "spending a penny public urinals for women when they finally appeared cost a penny to use." Lucky you. Your friend tells you about a recent innovation, the earth closet. Instead of water, it uses dry earth to cover waste, like a fancy litter box. It's being tested in homes and even schools. You're intrigued, but also skeptical. Dirt doesn't flush. You'll wait and see. Toilet paper, not invented yet. Not the kind you'd recognize. You use newspaper scrap fabric or pages from catalogs. The Sears Roebuck catalog is popular in America, but here you make do with whatever's cheap and vaguely absorbent. If you're rich, you might use cotton wool or lace, which sounds decadent until you remember where it's going. You step over a puddle that's suspiciously warm and try not to gag. You miss the countryside where you could at least dig a hole and walk away. City life means close quarters, shared smells, and absolutely no secrets. Still, things are changing. A man named Joseph Bazalgette is designing a new sewer system for London, a massive underground labyrinth to carry waste away from where people live. Revolutionary, expensive, desperately needed. People hope it'll help with the cholera outbreaks which have killed thousands. Of course, many still think cholera comes from bad air. You cough just in case. You duck into a tavern to escape the stench. The floor is sticky, the ale is warm, but the outhouse in the back is surprisingly clean. It has a door that locks. You nearly cry with gratitude. You sit, take a breath, and surprise. There's graffiti on the walls. Some of it is rude. Some of it is poetry. You're not sure which is which. When you return home, your boots are stained. You scrub them at the doorstep with a rag soaked in vinegar. It helps a little. But your nose still twitches. You light a candle and hope the flame's gentle flicker distracts you from the lingering scent of the day. To live in Victorian England is to accept that privacy is rare, cleanliness is optional, and dignity is a balancing act performed above a sloshing pot. Laundry day. You dread it like a funeral. It's not just a chore. It's a multi-hour full-body ordeal that leaves your arms aching, your hands raw, and your clothes only slightly less revolting than before. You start early just after dawn, when the chill hasn't yet lifted, and the sun is barely pushing through the coal-smudged sky. A pot of water is already heating over the fire, your sleeves are rolled, and the house smells like scorched soap and old sweat. That's the scent of ambition and desperation. In a proper Victorian home laundry day is typically Monday. Because what better way to begin the week than by boiling your family's underpants in lye? You gather the whites first. You use the term loosely. Most of them are more of a jaundiced gray. Undergarments, shirts, petticoats, everything linen, everything absorbent, everything embarrassing. Into the tub it goes doused in hot water and soap flakes that sting your nose. Soap was often homemade from beef tallow and caustic soda, and it smells aggressive. You stir it with a stick like a witch over a cauldron, watching bits of lint and mystery float to the top. A good soak comes first. The real scrubbing happens next. You kneel beside the wash tub with a ribbed metal washboard and go at it sleeves first, then armpits, then hems. Stains don't budge. Not really. Not without harsh encouragement. So you add more lye. Your hands begin to sting. Red. Cracked. Maybe bleeding, but who can tell? Historians still argue whether working-class women actually washed all their clothes weekly or just rotated them cleverly. Some think people rarely did full loads, just the essentials. Others believe Monday was laundry doomsday across the empire. Based on the amount of steam and swearing, it feels like the latter. The beating comes next. You haul sodden garments to the yard and beat them with a flat paddle over a stone slab. It loosens dirt, sure, but mostly it just vents your frustration. You imagine your boss's face as you slam his shirt collar again and again. Cathartic. Rinsing. That's another tub. Cold water now. If the soap doesn't come out, the fabric stiffens into a crunchy sheet. You wring each piece by hand, twisting until your knuckles pop. You hang them on a line strung between two soot-dusted walls, held up with a prop stick. Pray it doesn't rain, or that chimney ash doesn't blow over from next door. Either could undo 6 hours of agony. Then comes the ironing. You heat a heavy flat iron over the fire, test it with a spit sizzle, then press it against the still damp cotton. No steam setting, no temperature dial, just skill and luck. If it's too hot, the fabric scorches. Too cold, and it mocks your efforts. You sprinkle clothes with water or starch if you're feeling fancy, but mostly you just press hard and hope for the best. And let's talk about the actual laundry environment. You're doing all this bent over on stone floors in an unventilated back room with no plumbing, no electricity, and a faint mildew scent that never really goes away. You leave the door open when you can, but that just invites flies. Or the neighbor's cat. Or both. You wish you could pay someone else to do this. That's what middle-class families do. They hire laundresses, entire fleets of women trudging from house to house, washing other people's sweat for pennies. They get the worst of it, raw knuckles, aching backs, and zero gratitude. One laundress you know has hands like tree bark. She says she doesn't feel heat anymore. You believe her. Men's clothes are the worst. Starch-caked collars, heavy wool trousers, layers upon layers of tailoring that trap sweat like secrets. Women's clothes are no picnic either. Petticoats absorb everything, and corset liners are a special circle of hell. And don't even get started on cloth diapers. You've had nightmares about them. Fragrance. Not exactly. There's no tide with mountain breeze. Clean laundry smells like lye, coal smoke, and sunshine if you're lucky. If not, it just smells less offensive. That's a win. You take a break. Sit back on your heels. You look at your reddened hands, your steam-fogged windows, and the pile of damp, twisted fabric draped across every available surface. You consider burning your wardrobe and starting fresh. Then remember, fabric is expensive. Burning a petticoat is like torching half a week's wages. Finally, everything is clean, or cleaner, or at least not actively fermenting. You rest for a minute, then start folding, neatly, with corners aligned. Because if you're going to suffer this much, you may as well pretend you're in control. You did it. You laundered. You survived. And next Monday, you'll do it all over again. You reach for a fresh shift in the morning and pause because there isn't one. The linen undergarment you slept in last night is the same one you'll wear today. Maybe tomorrow too. Possibly all week. Welcome to the unspeakably intimate world of Victorian underwear hygiene. Now let's clarify what we mean by underwear. In your case, it's a long, loose-fitting chemise made of linen or cotton. It falls to mid-thigh or lower, has short sleeves, and is probably the cleanest layer you own, mostly because it's the first to get dirty. It sits directly against your skin, absorbing sweat, skin oils, and whatever else the day throws at you. Think of it as a wearable sponge. But here's the thing, you only have a few. If you're lucky, you own two. One to wear, one to wash. More likely, it's just one. Washing clothes is exhausting, time-consuming, and not something you do on a whim. So you wear your chemise for as long as you can bear it, and then maybe a day longer. You slide it on. The fabric is stiff under the arms, yellowing along the seams. There's a faint ring at the collar. You tell yourself it's just shadow. You tell yourself a lot of things. It's how you get through the day. On top of that go your stays, what you might call a corset. Boned with steel or whalebone, tightened with laces cinched just enough to help your posture and restrict deep breathing. You don't wear it directly against the skin because, well, ouch. It would chafe. It would bruise. It would trap sweat and dirt in ways your chemise was specifically designed to manage. Stays are rarely washed, just aired out. Maybe wiped down with vinegar. Maybe. If you're a man, your underlayers are simpler: a shirt, long drawers, wool socks. The shirt doubles as nightwear. Same deal, wear it until it's visibly crusty, then either wash it or turn it inside out and pretend that's enough. And you know that trend you've seen in modern period dramas. Everyone in pristine white underthings, lace-trimmed and delicately embroidered fiction. Pure fantasy. Your chemise is practical, rough, slightly damp, maybe itchy, maybe not. You've stopped noticing. Underpants. Actual underpants are a topic best avoided in polite company. For women, drawers are optional, sometimes discouraged. Open crotch bloomers are common, more breathable, easier for using the chamber pot without undressing, but not exactly hygienic by modern standards. Historians still argue whether drawers were considered indecent or progressive. Either way, they're not always worn. You're glad for the breeze, less glad for the friction. And let's talk about sweating. Deodorant, not a thing. Antiperspirant. Try talcum powder and good intentions. You sprinkle a bit in your armpits and hope it doesn't clump, or stain, or invite ridicule. Everyone sweats. Everyone smells. Society collectively agrees not to acknowledge it. Unless someone really crosses the line, then you call them uncivilized and carry on. As the day goes on, your undergarments soak up everything. Perspiration, coal dust, cooking fumes, possibly milk from the breakfast spill you never cleaned up. You can't toss them in the wash every day, so you air them out. Hang them by the fireplace. Let the smoke kill whatever bacteria you believe might be lurking. If you work a physical job, laundress maid, factory girl, you sweat through everything by noon. Your chemise clings to your back, your drawers stick to your thighs, and by evening your clothes could practically walk themselves to bed. But you still fold them, still pat them into shape, still wear them again tomorrow. Men far know better. They wear the same wool trousers every day, the same undershirt. If they're clean-shaven, they splash water on their faces in the morning and consider it done. If they have beards, they collect crumbs and soot with every meal. One man you know hasn't changed his socks in 4 days. He claims the cold air keeps them fresh. You avoid standing downwind. But through all this grime, there's still social pressure to appear tidy. A clean collar can distract from a stained shirt. A well-pinned cravat can hide a week's worth of neck grit. The illusion of cleanliness is often more important than the real thing. You iron. You starch. You hide the worst of it under outer layers and hope no one sniffs too closely. You do your best. You rub at the spots. You pat at the sweat marks. You whisper threats to your petticoat when it wrinkles. You are at war with your own clothes. And when laundry day finally comes around again, you drop your shift into the wash tub like it's a sin you've finally confessed. The water turns brown almost instantly. You don't ask what color it started as. You already know. You wake in the middle of the night to that slow, cramping ache in your lower belly. The one you dread. The one that always arrives uninvited, precisely when it's most inconvenient. You know what this means. You're bleeding, and you're Victorian. There's no box of tampons under your bed. No menstrual cup tucked away discreetly in a drawer. No painkillers. No heating pads, no TikTok explainer videos to tell you you're not cursed or broken. Just silence, and cloth, and shame. Your period is not something you manage, it's something you endure. You reach for your rag, a literal rag. Usually torn strips of linen, perhaps from an old undershift or sheet. You fold it into layers and tuck it where it needs to go, wedging it between your legs with a hand-me-down pair of split-crotch drawers to help hold it in place. There are no adhesives, no wings, no elastic. You just pray it doesn't shift. There are whispers of alternatives. Some women use sponges. Some try sheepskin. Some stuff their drawers with bits of wool. The more adventurous might fashion something from cotton batting. You've heard half in disbelief about women in France using rolled paper tubes, though you're not sure whether to be intrigued or horrified. And the worst part, the silence. You don't talk about this. Not with your friends. Not with your mother. Maybe with your older sister once in hushed tones under the covers when you were 12 and bleeding through your chemise for the first time. Menstruation is considered a personal failing, a woman's problem, something impure, even dangerous. Victorian doctors, and let's be honest, they're mostly guessing, believe menstruation can cause hysteria, madness, or fainting fits. Historians still argue whether menstrual blood was thought to poison food or kill plants. But you wouldn't risk making jam on day 2 just in case. You feel bloated, irritable, unclean. You try not to wince as you walk. Your stays make everything worse, pressing against your tender stomach like a smug whaleboned vice. But you don't complain. You still work. Still sew, still serve tea, still scrub the hearth. Period pain isn't an excuse. It's a secret. At night, you try not to stain the bedding. There's no mattress protector, no extra linens. If you bleed through, someone will know. Maybe the maid. Maybe your mother-in-law. Maybe everyone. You fold another rag, double it for safety, and lie perfectly still. And then there's the laundry. Washing menstrual cloths isn't just inconvenient, it's taboo. You rinse them out in cold water, scrubbing them quietly with lye soap behind the house or in a shared washroom, hoping no one notices. You don't hang them on the line. That would be vulgar. You hide them beneath a towel or inside a pillowcase, pretending it's just more linen. Just old stains. You've heard rumors about wealthier women using sanitary belts, crude contraptions of elastic and pins that hold a pad in place. You wonder if they work. You wonder what it feels like to not worry about leaks. Then you remember they cost a full week's wages, and you stop wondering. Some women skip the rags altogether, especially if they're poor. They let it flow. Blood trickling down their legs beneath layers of skirts and drawers. You've seen the stains on the backs of some girls' petticoats at the mill. No one says anything. No one needs to. And the smells. You're always afraid of the smell. There are no scented wipes, no deodorizing sprays. You sprinkle yourself with lavender water or rose oil and hope it covers everything. You don't know if it works. No one tells you. No one tells you anything. Even the timing is confusing. Your cycle isn't tracked with apps or wall calendars. You count backwards from the last time you ruined your only chemise and guess. Maybe it's 28 days. Maybe 31. maybe less depending on your diet, stress, or the moon, according to your neighbor. Victorian doctors believe all sorts of things about menstruation, like how it cleanses women of their emotions, or how suppressing it can cause mental illness. One particularly bold gentleman in a medical pamphlet suggests your uterus is wandering, and you wonder if that's why you feel dizzy. It's easy to feel like your body is rebelling against you, and in a way it is. You're exhausted. You're iron deficient. You're working through anemia and cramping and low-grade fever, all while pretending nothing's wrong. The only blessing, pregnancy, means no period. But pregnancy also means danger, pain, and possibly death. So you keep bleeding, keep folding the cloth, keep tucking, keep pretending. Sometimes at the end of a long week of leaking and worrying and silently suffering, you sit on the edge of your straw mattress, look down at the stained linen in your lap, and wonder what it would feel like to just be clean, to be understood, to be told that this isn't shameful or dirty or female trouble. But you don't say it aloud. You just rinse, hang, and carry on. Because Victorian hygiene doesn't stop for biology, especially yours. The water is tepid, edged with scum, and smells faintly like cabbage left too long in the sun. Still, you step forward. Because it's bath day, and for once you're not doing it in a tin basin in your kitchen with reused water from your siblings. No, today, you're treating yourself to the local public bathhouse. And by treating, we mean bracing yourself for the wet, Victorian equivalent of Russian roulette. You pay your penny if you can spare it, and the attendant grunts, pointing you toward a stall. The bathhouse is all peeling plaster and mildew-streaked ceilings. The tiled floors are slick and suspicious. Steam clings low in the air like a guilty secret. You clutch your towel closer. You're not here to relax. You're here to get marginally cleaner than you were before. Inside your stall is a wooden tub already half filled with lukewarm water. You don't ask who used it before you. You don't want to know. You step in trying not to think about what's lurking in that cloudy broth. There's a bar of coarse soap shared, of course, and maybe a small jug of water to rinse your hair. If you brought your own loofah, congratulations, you're a Victorian overachiever, but you're not alone. In the stall beside you, a woman is humming. 2 stalls down, someone's coughing hard enough to make you flinch. The walls are thin, the privacy illusory. You scrub quickly, not because you're finished, but because you want out before the next infection finds a way into your pores. Bathhouses are known for more than just bathing. They're also hotspots for lice boils, skin infections, and the occasional bout of something much worse. Historians still argue whether public bathing genuinely helped reduce disease in working-class districts, or just spread germs in warmer water. Still, if you're poor or live in crowded housing, without plumbing, the bathhouse is your only real shot at cleanliness. It's where laundry and humanity get wrung out side by side. Some people bathe fully clothed, modesty clinging to them, even as soap slips away. Others strip down quick and furtive eyes, darting to make sure they're not watched. There's no spa music, no scented candles, no gentle cascade of eucalyptus. Just damp air, stained wood, and a shared sense of resigned necessity. You step out, wrap yourself in your towel, and dry off with the practiced speed of someone who doesn't quite trust the space. There's no hairdryer. You leave with wet hair pinned under your bonnet, hoping the wind doesn't give you the ague Victorian slang for anything from a cold to actual malaria. If you're a man, maybe you head straight to the pub after. If you're a woman, you might rush home to get dressed before anyone sees your undone corset. And yet, for all its risks, this was progress. The rise of public bathhouses in the 19th century, particularly after the Public Baths and Washhouses Act of 1846, was part of the slowly dawning realization that filth and sickness might be connected. Revolutionary right sanitation pioneers like Edwin Chadwick began to argue that the state had a role in public cleanliness. Still, not everyone agreed. Some viewed communal bathing as improper or worse, morally dangerous. There were even debates about whether cleanliness could make the poor too proud. Yes, heaven forbid the poor stop smelling like sewage. Of course, the rich didn't bathe here. They had copper tubs at home heated with kettles and supervised by maids. But even then, they didn't bathe often. Once a week, maybe less. Sometimes they just wiped themselves down with a cloth and a splash of rose water. Queen Victoria herself reportedly bathed infrequently once every few weeks and was more fond of sponging off than full immersion. So if you're only dunking yourself once every fortnight, you're in royal company. But back to you. As you exit the bathhouse slightly cleaner but mentally no more at ease, you pass a mother dragging in two soot-covered children, a bar of Lice soap in one hand and a bucket in the other. You see a man scratching absently at his shoulder, muttering about fleas. You nod in grim solidarity. You've survived today's ritual, but you'll have to do it again. Eventually. Maybe not next week. Maybe not even next month. But someday, when the grime on your skin is too much to ignore, and your hair starts to feel like it's made of rope, you'll come back. You'll pay your coin. You'll hope for fresh water. And you'll try just for an hour to feel clean in a world that doesn't make it easy. Until then, you'll keep masking the stink with perfume, brushing your hair to hide the grease and praying no one looks too closely. After all, in Victorian times, bathing wasn't about luxury. It was survival. You hold the tiny glass bottle up to the light. Inside a creamy, chalky concoction with a faintly floral scent and a promise scrawled in delicate copperplate script. Porcelain skin in 3 days. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? But once you smear it on your face and let it dry, the tingle becomes a sting, and you remember the fine print no one wrote. It's mostly lead, and your glow may come at the cost of your skin, your sanity, and eventually your life. Welcome to the Victorian beauty routine where cosmetics are less Sephora, more slow poisoning. And still you do it because society expects you to look like you've never once been out in the sun, worked for a living, or had actual pores. That deathly pale look, it's the standard. Tanned skin means labor, and labor means poverty. So you're painting your face with white lead paste, dabbing your cheeks with red mercuric sulfide, and lining your eyes with powdered antimony. Glamorous in theory, fatal in practice. You peer into the cloudy mirror, watching the mixture crack at the edges of your mouth. It's thick, sticky, and smells like something scraped from a painter's palette. But still, you apply more. Because Victorian beauty isn't just about looking clean. It's about looking untouched, inhumanly flawless. And if it peels your skin raw or causes persistent trembling from lead poisoning, well, beauty is suffering. Historians still argue whether most women understood how toxic their cosmetics really were, or if they simply had no safer options. Men aren't exempt either. Upper-class gentlemen might dust their faces with rice powder, or wear discreet rouge to appear fresh and youthful. But for women especially, your entire social standing can hinge on a complexion that screams, "I've never done a day's work." So if you're poor, you might get crafty using chalk flour, or even crushed white stones. Or worse, arsenic wafers sold as beauty supplements, which promised to purify the skin and conveniently didn't list side effects like internal bleeding or sudden death. And then there's the hair game. You might use burnt match powder to darken your eyebrows, or sprinkle coal dust into thinning hairlines. Dandruff. Treat it with kerosene or vinegar. Bald spots. There's bear grease for that if you can afford it. And don't forget the occasional egg yolk and brandy hair mask, which sounds nice until it rots in the heat and leaves your scalp smelling like a tavern floor. You wander through a Victorian apothecary. Bottles line the shelves in gentle pastels and sinister browns. Labels promise rejuvenation, allure, radiance. But behind those dainty fonts lie cocktails of camphor, ammonia, lye, carbolic acid, and in some cases literal bleach. You're starting to see a pattern. There's no regulation here, no ingredient list, no patch test. Just blind hope and society's crushing expectation that you should look like you've never had a bowel movement, let alone an outbreak. Of course, not everyone has access to store-bought products. Many women mix their own dandelion juice for freckles, crushed beetroot for lips, and soot for eyeliner. Some even use boiled calf brains to smooth wrinkles. Yes, that's a real thing. Meanwhile, Queen Victoria reportedly banned lip rouge at court because it was associated with actresses and prostitutes. So if you're wearing it, be prepared for judgment and possibly skin rashes. But what if you're trying to undo the damage? There are creams for that too often, just more lead this time, marketed as cleansing lotion. You might hear whispers of women whose faces blistered and peeled away in layers, or of hysterical girls sent to asylums later discovered to have been suffering from arsenic toxicity, not madness. Still, these products keep selling. After all, they work in the same way a flamethrower might remove lint. You lean closer to the mirror again. You're starting to notice your eyelashes are thinning. Your skin is graying. Your teeth loosening slightly. You wonder if it's the cream or just London air. Probably both. But what's the alternative? Going out barefaced, you might as well announce you're a servant or worse, one of those women. So you reapply. You touch up the edges, and you try not to think about the growing headaches or the strange metallic taste in your mouth. It's fine. Everyone does it. You can stop anytime. Later, at a social gathering, someone compliments your complexion. You're simply glowing, they say. And you smile, not quite realizing how literal that is, because radiant skin in the 1800s often came with a half-life. You wake up already sweating through your underthings, though the morning sun hasn't even cut through the fog yet. There's a sourness in the air, stale cabbage, coal smoke. Maybe something worse, and your own scent isn't helping matters. Not that it's your fault. You followed every Victorian rule for hygiene, that is, you haven't bathed yet this week. You haven't changed your linen since Sunday, and your chamber pot is, well, let's not talk about that. But today is special. You're going out, so you reach for your bottle of cologne, or maybe a dab of lavender water, or if you're daring, a clove-scented pomade. Whatever it is, it's not meant to make you smell nice. It's a desperate act of war perfume, as armor meant to cover the undeniable truth that you and everyone around you stink. And that's the Victorian secret: no one smells fresh, because water is suspect, plumbing is rare, and bathing is still wrapped in superstition and shame. So you rely on masking agents. The rich spritz their lace handkerchiefs with bergamot or rose oil, holding them delicately to the nose whenever the stench of open sewers or unwashed masses becomes too much. The poor, you might boil pine needles or rub an orange peel on your wrists if you can get your hands on one. Perfume shops are booming. You might walk into one and be overwhelmed by the heady mix of musk, ambergris, patchouli, and sandalwood, all swirled into glass vials with fanciful names like Eau de Toilette or Queen's Garden Mist. Some are made with actual flowers, yes, but others are cut with chemicals or worse, animal secretions. Civet from the scent glands of cats, castoreum from beaver sacks. Real Victorian perfumes could smell rich and exotic, or like something you'd scrape off a boot in a barnyard. The irony, many of these scents were deliberately strong, cloying even. Because your true enemy wasn't personal hygiene, it was miasma. Remember that word, the belief that bad smells literally carried disease. It wasn't about cleanliness. It was about olfactory survival. If you could overpower the stench, maybe you could outwit the plague. Historians still argue whether perfuming was primarily a class signal or a genuine health strategy, but the effect was the same. Rich people doused themselves in luxury oils while the poor smelled like smoke and sweat. And everyone pretended it didn't matter. You pass a woman in the market. Her dress is impeccable. Her hair is coiled like a sculpture. And yet there's a whiff, a mix of lye soap, rose water, and something undeniably human. You give a polite nod and breathe shallowly. Later, someone tells you she's rumored to use vinegar foot baths and camphor tablets in her corset to control her odor. You take notes. Perfume even plays a role in mourning. After all, grief smells too. Corpses are not tidy. If you're wealthy enough to have a wake in your parlor, you'll be needing more than lilies. Mourning perfumes, usually dark, resinous, and heavy with spice, were developed to mask the decay of death itself. Just imagine crying into a lace handkerchief soaked in myrrh and benzoin, while behind you, a body gently ferments. Not that you can escape it at home. Your own bed linens reek of sweat and coal dust. Your hair smells like smoke from last night's hearth. Your boots hold the scent of city streets, horse dung beer spills, and rotting cabbage. And yet there's dignity in scent management. You try not to overdo it. Just a touch of violet water behind the ears. Maybe a pomade to slick the hair and cover up the fact that you haven't washed it in 5 days. Maybe 6, who's counting? You get used to it all. Your nose adjusts. Maybe even grows nostalgic for the smell of coal smoke at twilight, or the tang of vinegar wafting from your neighbor's laundry. Scent becomes part of your memory map. That perfume you wore to the spring ball. You still have the handkerchief. It smells like mothballs now, but the ghost of jasmine and despair lingers. Oddly enough, clean smells aren't always welcome. If you show up smelling of actual soap, people might assume you're ill or worse, French. Victorian England has a strange relationship with hygiene, and too much freshness is suspicious. A bit of musk means you're alive. A trace of sweat, you're working hard. And roses, well, roses are for hiding the truth. So as you sit at supper, surrounded by the mingling smells of gravy, gaslight, and 18 unwashed dinner guests, you smile. Because no one says a word. They just nod politely, dab their scented cloths to their noses, and go on pretending. That, dear listener, is the perfumed pageantry of Victorian life. Everyone stinks, but some people stink with style. You wake up feeling not quite right. There's a pressure behind your eyes, a scratch at the back of your throat, and your skin is clammy with sweat that smells just slightly off. Welcome to illness Victorian style. No ibuprofen, no antibiotics, not even a confirmed understanding of germs. Just a mix of home remedies, superstition, and physicians who think your bile might need balancing. You groan, sit up slowly, and consider your options. Do you summon the local doctor with his battered black bag and his deep suspicion of bathing? Or do you trust your neighbor who swears by mustard plasters and boiled onion tea? You choose the doctor. He arrives 3 hours late, smelling of tobacco and camphor. His fingers are stained yellow from snuff, and he doesn't wash them before examining you. Instead, he peers into your mouth, taps your chest, and frowns with the gravity of a man who's seen far too many cases of bad air. Germ theory. That's still a debated novelty, something whispered about in medical journals from France. Many British physicians still think miasma or corrupted air causes disease. So your treatment begins. He prescribes rest, of course, and maybe some cod liver oil, thick and fishy, or perhaps a purgative to clean out your bowels, because why not? Victorian logic says that illness is likely the result of internal stagnation and better out than in. If you're lucky, he doesn't recommend bleeding you. But if he does, well, brace yourself for a few ounces of your lifeblood to be politely drained into a porcelain bowl. Or maybe he brings out the leeches. The cool, wet squirm against your skin is worse than you imagine. They latch on, suck greedily, and fall off bloated. Supposedly, they'll relieve the congestion in your chest. Realistically, they just leave little vampire kisses behind and a growing sense of hopelessness. If things get worse, say your fever spikes, or you begin coughing blood, your doctor might suggest bed airing. This involves dragging your mattress outside into the sun for a few hours, based on the theory that fresh air can chase disease from your linens. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you just end up lying on a chilly bed with damp stuffing. Victorian hospitals are available technically, but you'd rather not go. Unless you fancy sharing a ward with 30 other moaning souls, all packed together with open wounds, tuberculosis coughs, and no antiseptic in sight. Florence Nightingale may have revolutionized field nursing, but hospitals are still where poor people go to die. You decide to stay put. Instead, someone in your household lights a sprig of rosemary and waves it around the room. A grandmother recommends carbolic acid on a cloth over your mouth. A friend brings a bottle of laudanum opium in tincture form. It helps you sleep and dream, but also constipates you for days. You begin to recover, or think you do. The worst is over, and the doctor nods solemnly and assures you your humors are realigning. But you're not the same. Something lingers in your lungs, and you know enough to fear it. Consumption, they call it. You cough delicately into a lace handkerchief and try not to notice the pinkish hue. Historians still argue whether the average Victorian truly believed their treatments worked, or whether they were simply enduring a medical system that hadn't caught up with reality. Germ theory is slowly taking hold by the 1880s, but the idea that invisible organisms might be causing your misery still strikes many as preposterous. After all, they can't see them. What they can see are puddles of sewage in the street, rotting animals in alleyways, and clouds of acrid factory smoke. That must be where sickness comes from. Sanitarians like Joseph Bazalgette are laying the groundwork for modern infrastructure building, London's grand sewer system to combat cholera and other scourges. But the average person still believes that foul smells themselves are to blame. That's why you hang herbs above your bed, why you sprinkle vinegar in the corners, and why every other household item promises to freshen the air rather than clean a surface. Of course, if you're wealthy, you can afford the latest medical marvels. Imported mineral waters from German spas, enemas delivered via engraved brass syringes, silver-coated tongue scrapers, even early vibrators marketed not so subtly as treatments for female hysteria. But for most, it's mustard poultices, warm gin, and the lingering hope that you simply wake up better tomorrow. You lie back in bed, swaddled in scratchy wool blankets. Your head pounds softly, and you drift in and out of sleep, lulled by the sound of hooves clattering on cobblestones outside and the faint dripping of water from the wash basin. You've survived this round. Probably. Just don't breathe too deeply. And for heaven's sake, don't forget to air your sheets. You're starting to feel better just in time to get dressed and re-enter the grime-coated chaos of industrial Victorian life. The fresh air. Don't get your hopes up. A thick gray haze settles over the city every morning. Soot from coal-burning factories, ash from home stoves, and horse dung trampled into the streets like nature's bitter perfume. If you could smell yourself under all of it, you'd gag. You tug on your corset, tightening the laces just like you've watched others do. It compresses your rib cage with a determined grip, forcing your spine straighter, your chest higher, and your organs, well, somewhere. Breathing becomes an act of grace. Sitting is a ritual. Eating, or keep it small. Historians still argue whether corsets actually caused long-term organ damage, but you can't deny the pinched discomfort. You feel faint, and that's considered fashionable. Now fully laced, you layer on petticoats, stockings, boots, and a gown, possibly dragging in a few fleas or lice from your poorly cleaned bedding in the process. Your underclothes haven't been laundered in at least a week, but you're used to the mild, sour smell. Everyone has it. That's why perfume exists. You step outside and immediately regret it. The streets are slick with mud and God knows what. Children run barefoot over broken bricks, dodging piles of manure and the occasional corpse of a stray animal. A nearby tannery spews out a sharp, acidic stench of lime and decomposing hides. Public sanitation laws are still emerging, and enforcement is spotty at best. On your way to work or to the market, you pass chimney sweeps coated head to toe in black dust, their eyes blinking through the grime. Some are so small you realize they're children, 6, 7 years old, sent into flues to scrape the creosote from within. The soot clings to their skin, and many develop what doctors will later recognize as occupational cancers. But now they're just lucky to have a job. You keep walking your boots sticky from the tarry residue that coats everything. At the factory gates, you're greeted by the groan of machinery, steam blasting from valves, and the rhythmic clank of metal on metal. The air is hot, metallic, and damp. No masks, no earplugs, no guards, just you and the machine. Inside your workstation is flanked by others all hunched, all sweating. Hygiene is laughable here. You share tools, handkerchiefs, even drinking cups. The toilet is a trench out back. A single bucket of water might serve a dozen people. You wipe your face with your sleeve and press on. A fellow worker faints. Her corset is too tight, and the room is too hot. Someone splashes her with water, then props her back up. Back to work. One less break means one less scolding from the foreman. Lunch is bread and cheese, maybe an apple. You eat with soot-covered fingers and try not to think about the rat droppings you saw near the pantry. Food safety is a joke. Milk might be watered down, or worse, tainted with formalin to keep it fresh. Bread is often bleached with alum to appear cleaner. If your teeth hurt, well, that's normal. They'll probably fall out by 35. You walk home beneath gas lamps just beginning to flicker to life. Their glow mixes with the fog to create a dreamlike haze that smells faintly of sulfur and horse. You're exhausted, and your skin feels tacky from sweat and pollution. But there's no bath waiting. Just a basin of lukewarm water and a rag, if you're lucky. You wash your face and neck, cough once or twice, and try not to think about that persistent ache in your chest. Still, there's pride. You survived another day in the factory without losing a finger. You didn't collapse in the street from corset strain. And even though you reek faintly of coal lard and old cloth, you smile at the thought that everyone else does too. Somewhere out there, a reformer is writing passionate essays about industrial hygiene. Others push for the abolition of child labor. Some even start campaigns to improve working women's health, arguing that clean air and clean clothes might actually be good for productivity. But for now, it's just you and the grime, and the corset, which, by the way, is digging into your liver again. You wake to coughing. Not yours this time, though you join in shortly after, but from the next room where a child wheezes with the same soot-lined lungs as yours. Welcome to Victorian childhood, where your very first job might just kill you before you grow out of it. Let's rewind. You're no longer the adult in this story. You're 7 now, small, skinny, and perfectly sized for the worst jobs no grown man wants to do. The day begins before the sun is fully up with a thin piece of bread and a splash of tea more tannin than nourishment. Your hands already bear calluses, and your nails are black no matter how much you scrub them in rain barrels or with sand. You walk barefoot through the alleyways, dodging trash heaps and the occasional puddle of, let's say, mystery fluid. You arrive at the chimney master's shop where a gruff man looks you over like livestock. Still scrawny enough, he mutters. That's your cue, your task. Climb inside narrow, soot-clogged chimneys in the wealthier parts of town. You shimmy up brick flues barely wider than your shoulders, scraping the sides clean with a brush tied to your wrist. Sometimes, if the brush gets stuck, you use your bare hands. Sometimes you get stuck. Chimney sweep deaths weren't uncommon. Kids got trapped, passed out, and suffocated, all for a few pennies a week. Historians still debate how widely known these dangers were. Many suspect the risks were ignored more than misunderstood. Your lungs are already scarred from soot. You cough black for hours afterwards, spitting into the gutter, where rats scurry to drink from the runoff. If you're lucky, the household you clean for gives you a crust of bread. More likely, they pretend not to see you at all. On other days, you work in a factory. You're short enough to crawl beneath dangerous machinery, to untangle jammed threads or clean gears while they're still moving. Workers have lost fingers, hands, even heads this way. But you're fast. You survive. Bathing isn't something you think about. You're covered in soot and sweat most days. Sometimes you rinse in a river or pond, but often you just sleep in your clothes. Hair goes uncombed. Lice are inevitable. Some children even developed a permanent blackened skin tone from coal dust caked into their pores. You don't even feel it anymore. And yet, amidst all this, you play. In side alleys and behind shops, you and other filthy, bright-eyed children toss pebbles or chase stray dogs. Laughter echoes through soot-filled streets. somehow you still find joy. For many, childhood ends not with age, but with illness. Respiratory disease is rampant, what people then called consumption we now recognize as tuberculosis. You've seen friends grow pale and thin, their coughs deepening, until one day they just don't show up to work. That's how most deaths are marked in your world, an empty spot on the factory floor or in the sweep master's ranks. Meanwhile, the middle-class children across town are told not to run too hard, lest they overheat in their thick wool clothing. They're powdered, perfumed, and schooled, at least the boys are. But even in the fancier neighborhoods, Victorian hygiene standards for kids are dubious. Many families still believe cold baths can cure laziness, or that brushing your hair 100 times will draw out impurities. Germ theory hasn't quite landed yet, though. Whispers of it are spreading. Some well-meaning adults are starting to pay attention. In the 1840s and 50s, reformers campaigned for laws banning child chimney sweeps. They push for factory-age minimums and limited work hours. But enforcement is weak and poverty is stronger. For every child who escapes, 10 more take their place. One odd remedy floating around, making kids drink sulfur water to clean out their systems. It smells like rotten eggs and tastes worse, but hey, that's Victorian wellness for you. Herbal tonics, cod liver oil, even arsenic-based health drops were sold for growing bodies. As the evening approaches, you drag yourself home, whatever that means for you. A cramped tenement flat. A shared room above a tavern. Maybe even just a covered alley where other working children huddle together for warmth. You pull your knees to your chest, skin still gritty with coal dust, and fall asleep to the lullaby of coughing, creaking floorboards, and distant horse hooves on cobblestone. No bedtime stories, no warm bath, no clean sheets. Just one more night survived. You're older now. Not quite Victorian old, which, let's be honest, might mean mid-30s, but old enough to start noticing something strange. The streets don't stink quite as much. Not every river is frothy with human waste. And could it be a government official talking about sanitation? Yep. The tides are finally turning. You're living through the birth of something the Victorians call public health. And it's not pretty clean or fast, but it's happening. It starts in many ways with a crisis. Remember the Thames, that open sewer you once used to dump your chamber pot water? Well, in the summer of 1858, it gets so bad, so unbearably foul, that even Parliament can't ignore it. The smell rises into the chambers of the House of Commons and nearly drives politicians to vomiting. It's dubbed the Great Stink, and it does what polite letters and child death statistics never could. It shames the elite into action. A man named Joseph Bazalgette steps up with a revolutionary plan. He designs a massive underground sewer system for London, one that redirects human waste away from drinking water sources. Construction takes years, but it works. By the end of the century, the city smells a little less like death, and people are dying less too. Meanwhile, you start to see another strange phenomenon. Soap, once a luxury, is being marketed aggressively. Big posters appear across town claiming that cleanliness is not just nice, but moral. Soap is civilization, they cry. It becomes tied to patriotism, to godliness, even to whiteness. Yes, the Victorians love a little casual racism with their marketing. Suddenly your neighbors are scrubbing more. Not because it feels good cold water still dominates, but because society tells them they must. Bathhouses multiply. Municipal water supplies improve. Even the lower classes start getting indoor plumbing albeit decades after the wealthy. But don't get too cozy. Toothpaste still tastes like chalk. Women still use dangerous creams to whiten their faces. And while germ theory is gaining ground, thanks to the likes of Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister, many doctors still scoff at the idea of invisible creatures causing disease. Miasma, or bad air, remains a popular scapegoat. Still, hygiene is becoming fashionable. You see the rise of sanitary science clubs. Schools begin teaching children about brushing teeth, bathing regularly, and not sharing towels. Radical, I know. Men shave more often. Women wash their underclothes more frequently, even if they still air their menstrual rags out behind curtains, instead of, heaven forbid, discussing them. And speaking of women, the hygiene movement begins to intersect with the early feminist push. Some campaigners argue that for women to be taken seriously in public life, they must embody purity, which in turn means cleanliness. Thus begins a strange and slightly obsessive era of moral hygiene that lasts well into the 20th century. Your final stop, a freshly built tenement block with actual toilets. One per floor, sure, and the smell still lingers in summer, but it flushes. The floors are swept. The communal washroom has a tap with cold water, and if you're feeling rich, you might heat a kettle on the stove to mix in. A basin bath, a fresh bar of carbolic soap, and heaven help us, a towel that hasn't been used by 6 people before you. The journey from soot-covered factory child to someone with access to hot water and a toothbrush hasn't been smooth. It's cost lives. And there are still countless Victorians living without these modern comforts. Historians continue to debate whether the hygiene revolution genuinely transformed daily life for the working class, or merely papered over the filth with new social expectations. But tonight, in this dim room with clean sheets and maybe a lavender sachet under your pillow, you're not coughing soot. You're not dreading the toilet. You're not swatting lice. You're clean, well, cleanish. But compared to where we started, practically spa level. Word count 163. Wind down begins. The worst is behind you now. Let your breath soften as we leave the soot and soap-slick cobblestones behind. You've seen what it was like to be truly unclean inside and out, day after endless day. You've trudged through slop-filled streets and stood in the steam of a shared bathhouse. You've braced through ice-cold tin bucket rinses and pressed scented handkerchiefs to your nose when all else failed. And somehow you survived it, even if your corset left bruises. Even if your toothbrush was made of bone and horsehair. Even if more than once you seriously considered perfume as a substitute for a proper wash. But now, as the noise of carriages fades and the gaslights dim to flickers in your memory, you can feel something lighter. Not just your skin, but your spirit. You've earned the right to lie back clean and calm, drifting towards sleep with a grateful sigh. So sink deeper into your pillow. Let the warmth wrap around you like freshly dried linen. Imagine the hush of an empty street just after midnight, quiet still, no chamber pots flying overhead. You made it. You survived Victorian hygiene. And with that, sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.